My wife sued me for half my inheritance after our divorce, claiming she provided emotional support to my dying father. In court, I played audio of her telling friends, "I can't wait for the old man to die so we can access the money." Her face when the judge heard her mocking my grief was worth every penny of legal fees. Now she's called my attorney 57 times begging for a settlement. I've been debating whether to post this story for weeks now. Part of me wants to leave this chapter of my life behind, but after the final court hearing last month and the absolute chaos that's followed, I need to get this off my chest. This is long, but I promise it's worth it if you stick with me. I'm 35M, and until recently I was married to Jessica, 33F, for 8 years. We met in graduate school, both ambitious professionals with similar goals and backgrounds. I'm in software engineering management. She works or used to work in pharmaceutical marketing. On paper, we were perfect. Same values, compatible career trajectories, both wanted to travel before settling down to have kids in our mid-30s. We even finished each other's sentences. At least, that's what I thought we had. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer almost 2 years ago. Anyone who knows anything about this diagnosis understands what it means. A brutal battle with terrible odds. Dad was my hero. He raised me single-handedly after my mom died from breast cancer when I was 11. He was an aircraft mechanic who worked his way up to owning his own maintenance shop, putting me through college without a penny of debt. He'd work 14-hour days, then come home and help me with science projects or drive me to baseball practice. Never complained, never missed important moments. When he got the diagnosis, my world imploded. I'm an only child, so handling everything fell on my shoulders. Managing his medical care, navigating insurance nightmares, driving him to chemotherapy appointments, and trying to prepare emotionally for what we both knew was coming. Jessica seemed supportive initially. She'd join us for some doctor appointments, helped organize his medication schedule, and assured me we'd get through this together. But as Dad's condition deteriorated, and I spent more time at his house, her attitude shifted dramatically. "You're over there again? You were just there yesterday. Don't you think the hospice nurses are paid to handle this stuff? We haven't been on a date night in 3 weeks because of your dad." I tried explaining that my father was literally dying, that he had sacrificed everything for me growing up, and that I needed to be there for him in his final months. But Jessica somehow always made it about her, how hard it was on her that I was distracted, how she was suffering from lack of attention, how our life was on hold. Dad fought hard, longer than the doctors predicted, but passed away 14 months after his diagnosis. I was devastated, barely functioning. The day after his funeral, literally the day after we buried him, Jessica was already asking about the will and inheritance details. "Did his lawyer mention when things would be settled?" she asked, while I was still in my funeral suit, staring blankly at the sympathy cards piling up on our kitchen counter. I should have recognized the red flags, but grief does strange things to your perception. Everything feels distant and foggy when you're in that kind of pain. Looking back, there were dozens of warning signs I'd missed throughout our marriage. Moments of callousness I'd excused as ambition or practicality. My father left me everything. His home, fully paid off, retirement accounts, some conservative investments, a small life insurance policy, and his business. All told, about $1.2 million. Not a fortune by any means, but a substantial amount that represented his lifetime of hard work, careful saving, and meticulous planning. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was still moving through life in a fog. I'd returned to work part-time, mainly to have something to focus on besides grief. One Saturday morning, I found Jessica's phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. A notification popped up from her friend Megan. "Any update on the money? Still on for Cabo next month?" Something about the message hit me wrong. Jessica and I hadn't discussed any vacation plans. We were supposedly saving for a down payment on a larger house. And the timing, planning a beach getaway weeks after my father's death? I know snooping is wrong. Under normal circumstances, I'd never violate someone's privacy like that. But in that moment, some survival instinct kicked in. I opened her text chain with Megan and scrolled up, my hands shaking. What I found shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Jessica had been complaining about Dad's inconvenient illness for months. The messages went back to just weeks after his diagnosis. Another weekend wasted at the hospital. Kill me now. I told him to just hire a full-time nurse, but no, he has to be there supporting his dad. Meanwhile, who's supporting me? As his condition worsened, so did her messages. It's taking forever. I've been playing supportive wife for nearly a year now. We could do so much with that money if the old man would just hurry up. I've already picked out the beach house we'll buy once it's over. Just need him gone first. Trying to decide between Outer Banks and Florida Keys. I was physically ill, throwing up in the kitchen sink. The woman I married, who had sat beside me at my father's deathbed, who had held my hand at his funeral, had been counting the days until he died so she could get her hands on his money. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put her phone back exactly where I'd found it. Somehow, I managed to act normal for the rest of the day, a strange calm settling over me. That night, I told Jessica I needed to spend some time at Dad's house to start sorting through his belongings. Instead, I drove around for hours, trying to process what I'd discovered. First thing Monday morning, I contacted a divorce attorney, Andrea Levinson, a partner at a respected firm who specialized in high-conflict divorces and complex asset protection. During our initial consultation, I showed her the screenshots I'd taken of Jessica's texts. "This is certainly illuminating about her character," Andrea said, "but in itself, it doesn't protect your inheritance. In Virginia, inheritances are typically considered separate property, but things can get complicated if funds are commingled or if your wife makes claims about contributions to your father's care." "What kind of claims?" I asked. She could argue that she provided substantial caregiving, emotional support, or that her contributions to your household freed you up to care for your father, thereby helping to preserve the inheritance. It's a stretch, but we've seen these arguments before. Andrea advised me not to confront Jessica yet. Better to let her think everything was normal while we prepared the divorce filing and secured important documents. That same day, I moved all my important papers to a safe deposit box at a new bank where Jessica and I had no accounts. I also quietly began documenting every aspect of Dad's care, creating a detailed timeline showing who was actually providing support during his illness. For 8 agonizing weeks, I lived with someone I now realized was a stranger, watching her fake sympathy for my loss while she researched vacation properties and luxury cars. I slept in the guest room, telling her I was having nightmares and didn't want to disturb her. She barely seemed to notice. She was too busy waiting for the inheritance to clear. One evening, Jessica hosted a girls' night at our house. She thought I was attending a grief support group session, but I'd actually pushed it back an hour to accommodate a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss protecting my inheritance. Our home office shared a wall with the living room where Jessica and her friends would be gathering. Virginia is a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning only one person involved in a conversation needs to consent to record it. While this didn't technically apply to conversations I wasn't part of, Andrea suggested documenting Jessica's true intentions could be crucial if she tried claiming entitlement to the inheritance. I set up a recording device in the office, hidden among my books, but capturing audio from the adjacent room, then left for my meeting. When I returned home 3 hours later, the house was empty. They'd moved their party to a local wine bar. I retrieved the recording device, not expecting much. What I captured exceeded my worst expectations. After a few glasses of wine, Jessica and her 3 closest friends, Megan, Tara, and Diane, had started discussing my father's death and the inheritance. Their conversation was vile. "So is it all settled yet?" Megan asked. "Still working through probate," Jessica replied, sounding annoyed. "His lawyer is such a dinosaur. Everything takes forever. But it's definitely coming, right?" Tara pushed. "Like it's actually real money?" Jessica laughed. "Oh, it's real. House in Arlington worth at least $650K, retirement accounts, life insurance, and that shabby little business he ran. Altogether about $1.2 million. Not exactly Bezos money, but enough to change things for us." "And Mike has no idea you're planning to upgrade once it comes through?" Diane asked, lowering her voice slightly. "God, no. He's still crying himself to sleep over Daddy. Jessica's mocking tone made my stomach turn. I can't wait for the old man's estate to finally clear so we can access the money. I've earned it after listening to Mike cry about his daddy issues for months. You don't feel bad at all? Tara asked, sounding more curious than judgmental. Please, Jessica responded. The man was basically a glorified mechanic who got lucky with some stocks. Mike acts like we lost a Nobel Prize winner. Besides, it's not like I'm doing anything wrong. Half of what's his is legally mine. I'm just accelerating the timeline a bit. There was more. Discussions about property in the Outer Banks, a place Dad and I had visited every summer when I was growing up, a Mercedes GLE she'd been eyeing, and plans to eventually leave her job to explore opportunities more aligned with her lifestyle goals. The most damning part came when Megan asked if Jessica was worried about how I'd react when she filed for divorce after getting the money. Mike's so conflict-averse he'll probably just give me what I ask for to avoid a fight, Jessica said confidently. Besides, I've been building a case. I've got photos of me at the hospital, texts where he thanked me for being supportive. I've been very strategic. I listened to the recording 3 times, each time feeling less hurt and more resolved. This wasn't just about money. It was about my father's legacy and a level of betrayal I couldn't have imagined from someone I'd shared my life with for 8 years. I filed for divorce the following week. When Jessica was served the papers while at work, she came home livid, demanding to know what was happening. I stayed calm, simply stating that I knew our marriage was over and wanted to proceed with a clean break. What does that mean? What did I do? She shouted, throwing the papers on the kitchen counter. I think we both know this marriage isn't working, I replied. I want to be fair about dividing our assets, but I need space right now. Her anger quickly transformed into calculation. Is this about the inheritance? Because legally, I'm entitled to. We can let the lawyers handle the details, I interrupted, retreating to the guest room. The next day, she'd already retained counsel, Bradley Morris, an aggressive divorce attorney known for his scorched earth approach. Within a week, they filed a counter-petition demanding half of all marital assets, temporary spousal support, and most shocking of all, equitable interest in inheritance funds due to substantial supportive contributions during terminal illness of the testator. Andrea explained what this meant. They're claiming Jessica provided such significant support during your father's illness that she essentially helped preserve the inheritance, making her entitled to a portion of it. That's absurd, I said. She barely visited him. The hospice nurses probably wouldn't even recognize her. We know that, Andrea nodded, but they're betting on you settling quickly to avoid a messy court battle while you're still grieving. It's a common tactic. Leverage emotional vulnerability to force concessions. Over the next 6 months, the divorce proceedings dragged on painfully. Jessica's attorney demanded extensive documentation of my father's assets, care arrangements, and our marital contributions. Meanwhile, Jessica began crafting a public narrative, casting herself as the devoted wife who supported both me and my father through a tragic illness, only to be blindsided by divorce once the inheritance came through. She even created a special Instagram highlight reel titled Family First, featuring the few photos of her visiting Dad in the hospital, carefully edited to make it appear she was a constant presence during his illness. What Jessica didn't know was that I'd been meticulously building my own documentation, a calendar showing every single hospital visit and who actually attended, mostly just me, testimony from Dad's hospice nurses about who was actively involved in his care, and of course, the damning audio recording. The final hearing was scheduled for early November, nearly 9 months after I'd filed for divorce. By this point, we'd already separated our basic marital assets. The process stalled, mainly because of Jessica's aggressive claims on my inheritance. Andrea advised me that while the law was on my side regarding the inheritance, judges have significant discretion in divorce cases. If she can convince the judge she made substantial contributions to your father's care, there's a small chance she could be awarded some portion of the inheritance, she warned. Are you sure you don't want to consider offering a modest settlement to end this quickly? Not a chance, I said firmly. This is my father's legacy. The idea of her getting a penny of it after what she said about him makes me physically ill. The day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was nearly empty, just a few lawyers waiting for other cases and a court reporter setting up her equipment. Judge Eleanor Harmon, a stern woman in her early 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, presided. Jessica looked immaculate in a conservative navy dress, her expression a perfect blend of dignity and subtle suffering. We hadn't spoken directly in months, communicating only through our attorneys. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her attorney presented their case first, painting a beautiful picture of Jessica as the devoted wife who carried the emotional and practical burden of my father's illness alongside me. Bradley Morris dramatically described how Jessica had substantially contributed to preserving the inheritance through her unwavering support, sacrificing her own needs to help care for a dying man. Jessica took the stand, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, as she described late nights at the hospital, helping organize medical documents and providing emotional support that allowed Mike to continue working while managing his father's care. She produced carefully selected photos of her few visits to the hospital and text messages where I had thanked her for being there for us. Without Jessica's support, her attorney concluded, Mike would have been unable to maintain the level of care that preserved his father's estate. Her contributions directly helped secure the inheritance, entitling her to an equitable portion under Virginia case law precedents, including Northcutt, and Fleming v. Fleming. Judge Harmon looked thoughtful, taking notes throughout their presentation. Thank you, Counselor. Miss Levinson, your response? Andrea stood calmly. Your Honor, before we present our case, I'd like to submit evidence that directly contradicts the narrative presented by opposing counsel. She handed documents to the court clerk, who passed them to the judge and Bradley Morris. These are calendar records of all hospital and hospice visits during Thomas Bennett's illness, authenticated by the medical facility's visitor logs. You'll note Miss Patterson appears on fewer than 12% of these visits, despite her claims of constant presence. Bradley Morris objected immediately, arguing the logs weren't definitive proof of support, which could take many forms. Judge Harmon overruled, noting the logs directly contradicted testimony just given. Additionally, Andrea continued, we have affidavits from 3 of Mr. Bennett's hospice nurses stating they had minimal interaction with Miss Patterson and would not characterize her as significantly involved in his care. Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat, whispering urgently to her attorney. Finally, Your Honor, we have audio evidence that reveals Miss Patterson's true attitudes regarding Mr. Bennett's illness and the inheritance. I should note that this recording was legally obtained in Virginia, a one-party consent state, and has been authenticated by forensic audio experts. Bradley objected again, more forcefully. Your Honor, we haven't been provided with this alleged recording during discovery. This is inappropriate and prejudicial. The recording was included in supplemental disclosures filed last month, Andrea responded smoothly. Page 47 of our exhibit list, submitted October 8th. We have receipt confirmation from your office. Judge Harmon reviewed her files, then nodded. Objection overruled. You may proceed with the recording, Miss Levinson. Andrea played selected portions of the girls' night conversation. Jessica's clear voice filled the courtroom. I can't wait for the old man's estate to finally clear so we can access the money. I've earned it after listening to Mike cry about his daddy issues for months. Please. The man was basically a glorified mechanic who got lucky with some stocks. Mike acts like we lost a Nobel Prize winner. Mike's so conflict-averse, he'll probably just give me what I ask for to avoid a fight. Besides, I've been building a case. I've got photos of me at the hospital, texts where he thanked me for being supportive. I've been very strategic. The courtroom fell silent. Jessica's face drained of color. She stared straight ahead, her carefully composed expression crumbling into something between shock and terror. Her attorney looked equally stunned, frantically writing notes and attempting to signal Jessica to maintain her composure. Judge Harmon removed her reading glasses, her expression stern. Miss Patterson, would you like to explain how these statements align with your testimony about providing devoted care to your father-in-law? Jessica stammered. That's not. It's taken out of context. I was just venting to friends. Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes. And the comments about strategically collecting evidence to build your case. The judge pressed. I didn't. I wasn't. Jessica looked desperately to her attorney, who asked for a brief recess. Judge Harmon denied the request. Counselor, does your client wish to continue claiming she provided meaningful emotional support to the deceased? Because what I'm hearing suggests quite the opposite. Bradley attempted to recover, arguing that private comments made while drinking with friends shouldn't override the documented instances of support, however limited. He suggested the recording might be selectively edited and questioned its authenticity. Judge Harmon wasn't having it. The authentication documentation appears thorough, Counselor. As for context, I'm struggling to imagine any context in which referring to a dying man as the old man who needs to hurry up so one can access his money would be appropriate from a purportedly devoted caregiver. After hearing brief closing arguments, Judge Harmon delivered her ruling with remarkable speed and clarity. This court finds Miss Patterson's claim to any portion of the Bennett inheritance completely without merit and bordering on fraudulent. The evidence overwhelmingly indicates not only that she provided minimal support during Thomas Bennett's illness, but that she viewed his death primarily as a financial opportunity. She continued, her voice tight with barely controlled disgust. The inheritance shall remain Mr. Bennett's separate property in its entirety. Further, given the evidence of Miss Patterson's attempt to misrepresent her role in Mr. Bennett's care, I'm ordering her to pay $15,000 toward Mr. Bennett's legal fees incurred in defending against these specious claims. Jessica's face crumpled. The carefully constructed image of the supportive wife had been completely destroyed, replaced by the reality of who she truly was. Someone who had mocked a dying man and his grieving son while plotting to take advantage of both. As we left the courtroom, Jessica tried to catch my arm, tears streaming down her face. Mike, please, I didn't mean any of that. You know I cared about your dad. I just said those things to sound cool to my friends. I gently removed her hand from my arm. The time for lies is over, Jessica. We're done here. In the weeks following the hearing, the full impact of Jessica's actions began catching up with her. I learned through mutual friends that she'd been so confident in getting a substantial settlement that she'd made several financial commitments. 1. She'd given notice at her pharmaceutical marketing job, planning to take time to reassess her career path once the divorce settlement came through. 2. She'd put a $30,000 non-refundable deposit on a beach house in the Outer Banks, the same area where Dad and I had vacationed throughout my childhood. She'd used most of her savings for this, assuming she'd recoup it many times over from my inheritance. 3. She'd leased a new Mercedes GLE with payments she couldn't possibly afford on her own, again assuming the settlement would cover it. When the ruling came down granting her nothing and actually ordering her to pay a portion of my legal fees, her carefully constructed plans collapsed. Her first response was denial. She instructed her attorney to file appeals and motions to reconsider, all of which were promptly denied. Then came the desperation. Over the past 3 weeks, Jessica has called my attorney's office dozens of times. 57 calls according to Andrea's irritated legal assistant, who's been keeping a log for potential harassment documentation. She's left tearful voicemails begging for a settlement meeting, saying she'll accept a reasonable amount and drop all claims. I'm about to lose my apartment, she sobbed in one message Andrea forwarded to me. The dealership is threatening to repossess the car. Please, I just need something to get back on my feet. 20,000 would be enough. Even 10. Please, Mike. I haven't responded to any of these pleas. The divorce is final, the inheritance is secure, and I've instructed Andrea to send a cease and desist letter if the calls continue. Last weekend, I began the painful process of sorting through Dad's belongings. His house, my house now, is filled with memories, his collection of aviation books, the handmade toolbox that followed him through 40 years of aircraft maintenance, photos of the two of us fishing, camping at my college graduation. Among his papers, I found a letter he'd written to me shortly after his diagnosis, to be opened after his death. In it, he expressed how proud he was of the man I'd become, his hopes for my future, and his confidence that I would use whatever he left behind wisely. The last paragraph hit me hardest. I've never been a man who measured success by bank accounts or possessions. True wealth is in the relationships we build, the integrity we maintain, and the difference we make in others' lives. Choose carefully who you share your life with, son. Look for someone who values these same things. I think Jessica is that person, but only time will tell. Whatever happens, trust your instincts and protect what matters. Dad was right about everything except Jessica, and in the end, his advice still guided me to protect what mattered, his legacy and my own integrity. I'm using part of the inheritance to establish a scholarship fund for aspiring aircraft mechanics at the technical college where my father got his start. The first 2 recipients will be announced next fall. Single parents pursuing technical education, just like Dad was when he raised me. The house is on the market. Too many memories there now, both of Dad and Jessica's betrayal. I'm looking at apartments closer to my company's headquarters, focusing on my career and slowly rebuilding my life. Sometimes I still can't believe the person I built a life with for 8 years could be so callous, so calculating. But then I remember her face when that recording played in court, the mask slipping to reveal the truth underneath. And I know I made the right decision. The inheritance will help secure my future, just like Dad wanted. But the most valuable thing he left me wasn't financial. It was his example of integrity, work ethic, and the wisdom to recognize what's truly valuable in life. I miss you, Dad. You were worth more than she could ever understand. Update: 3 months later. I didn't expect the original post to receive so much attention. Thank you all for the supportive comments and messages. A lot has happened since then, so I thought I'd provide an update. The legal situation is fully resolved. Judge Harmon denied Jessica's motion for reconsideration in a scathing 6-page opinion that my attorney said was unusually detailed for such a ruling. Jessica finally exhausted her appeals, and her new attorney, Bradley Morris, apparently dropped her as a client after the hearing, advised her to move on. After receiving our cease and desist letter, Jessica stopped calling my attorney's office directly. Instead, she shifted to a bizarre public relations campaign, telling a heavily edited version of events to anyone who would listen. According to mutual friends, her narrative now portrays her as the victim of a vindictive ex-husband who manipulated the legal system against her. The most surprising development came from Jessica's younger sister, Rachel. We'd always gotten along well, and she reached out about a month after the final hearing. We met for coffee, and she shared some revelations that filled in many blanks. Apparently, Jessica had been planning this scenario for years. Rachel showed me texts from nearly 2 years ago, shortly after Dad's diagnosis, where Jessica had outlined her exit strategy in detail. She'd calculated the potential inheritance value with surprising accuracy and had been researching divorce attorneys specializing in inheritance claims since the early days of Dad's illness. Even more disturbing, Jessica had borrowed $45,000 from her parents, telling them it was for a joint investment opportunity that would pay off once our financial situation improved. She'd promised to repay them with interest from the divorce settlement. They're now pursuing legal action against her, something Rachel said was destroying the family. The career consequences for Jessica have been significant. Her former employer discovered she'd been using company time and resources to research properties and plan her post-divorce life. Combined with her unexplained absences and declining performance, this led to her termination rather than acceptance of her planned resignation. Her attempt to rebrand herself as a lifestyle influencer on Instagram faltered when several followers connected her to my original Reddit post. Her account is now private, with her follower count dropping dramatically. As for me, I've been focused on healing and moving forward. 1. I sold Dad's house last month to a young family. The father is a Navy aircraft mechanic who reminds me a lot of Dad. It felt right. 2. I've moved into a new condo closer to work and joined a grief support group that's been genuinely helpful. 3. The Thomas Bennett Memorial Scholarship is officially established. The technical college where Dad studied is naming their aircraft maintenance lab after him in recognition of the endowment. 4. I've reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Jessica had subtly isolated me from people she deemed not ambitious enough for our social circle. The hardest part remains processing how someone I trusted completely could maintain such an elaborate deception for years. My therapist suggests Jessica likely has narcissistic tendencies that allowed her to compartmentalize her actions without experiencing genuine guilt. I've had no direct contact with Jessica since the courthouse. Last week, she apparently staged a chance encounter at a grocery store near my new place. I simply walked away while she called after me, creating a scene that ended with store security asking her to leave. The beach house in the Outer Banks that Jessica lost her deposit on? I visited that area last month, a sort of pilgrimage to the place Dad and I loved. Standing on those beaches again brought back memories of him teaching me to fish, building sandcastles, and our late-night talks on the porch. Jessica tried to taint those memories by planning to use Dad's money to buy property there, but in the end, she couldn't touch what really mattered. For those who asked about the recording that changed everything, yes, I still have it, securely stored with all the legal documentation. I don't listen to it anymore. There's no need. I've learned what I needed to from this experience. 1. Trust your instincts. I knew something was wrong long before I found evidence. 2. Grief reveals people's true character, both in how they handle their own and how they respond to yours. 3. The value of proper legal counsel cannot be overstated. Andrea's methodical approach saved my father's legacy. I don't plan to post any further updates. The divorce is final, Jessica's claims are permanently dismissed, and I'm moving forward. I've started dating again recently. Nothing serious, just coffee with a pediatric nurse I met through the hospital's bereavement group. She knew Dad during his treatment and speaks of him with genuine respect. It's refreshing. Dad used to say, "Life's too short to waste it looking in the rearview mirror." He was right, as usual. I'm focused on the road ahead now, grateful for the inheritance of wisdom he left me, worth far more than any financial bequest. Thank you again for all the support and kind words. They've meant more than you know.